I'm not signing that until you calm down, she said, arms crossed, wine glass in hand, legs tucked under her like she was holding court on a throne that I paid for. I hadn't even raised my voice. Hell, I hadn't said more than 6 words since she walked in wearing the same perfume she only ever used for nights out with her book club. You know the one, Wednesday nights, every week, without fail, with women I've never met and names she never remembered twice. I stood in the living room, hands in my pockets, watching her swirl that Merlot like a goddamn queen, acting like I was the crazy one for daring to mention the word affair. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just smirked and said, "If you really knew something, you'd have done something already. So, go ahead, do something." And then, I swear to God, she winked. That's the thing about being underestimated by your own wife. It doesn't hurt. It burns. Because it means she forgot who I was before the house, before the 2-car garage, before the 9 years of marriage that apparently meant less than her monthly highlights appointment. I stood there for a full 10 seconds, letting her bask in her little power trip, letting her think I backed down like I had the last 5 times. But this time, I didn't bring it up because I was unsure. I brought it up because I'd already started moving pieces she didn't know existed. "You remember Ray Brummel?" I asked quietly. She paused. Just a fraction of a second, but I saw the twitch in her jaw. "Your old boss? The one who—" "Yeah, him." Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you bringing him up?" I smiled. "Just making conversation. Ray was more than my old boss. He was my first mentor in the defense industry. The kind of guy who taught me to read procurement fraud like it was children's bedtime stories. He also happened to be on the ethics board for corporate compliance cases now. And that little vendor contract her special friend signed? Yeah, that was already in Ray's inbox, along with hotel receipts, an anonymous report, and a time-stamped clipboard from a valet I tipped very, very well. But that wasn't even the main move. That was just bait. The real trap started 2 weeks ago, when she left the basement door unlocked. See, I'm not a violent man. I don't scream. I don't threaten. But I document. I archive. I prepare like a funeral director. And while she was busy being empowered, I was quietly digging through our storage boxes for a binder she thought I threw away. Our original prenup draft, the version before her mom got involved. The one where she agreed to walk away with nothing if infidelity ever came up. It had her signature. And a date. She had no idea I kept it. And I had no intention of using it, until she said those words, "Do something." She drained her wine, walked upstairs, and I just stood there in the silence, looking at the photo on the mantle, our wedding day. Me in that stiff tux, her smiling like she hadn't already slept with one of the groomsmen the week before. I didn't know it at the time, of course. But the best part? That groomsman? He's the one who texted me last month out of guilt. Told me everything. Even offered to testify. So no, I wasn't guessing. I knew. And I wasn't going to scream, or beg, or follow her car around like some jealous teenager. I had a different plan. A colder one. I went back to the kitchen, grabbed a sticky note, and wrote just 2 words. Game on. Then I stuck it to her wine glass and walked out. She wouldn't understand what it meant. Not at first. But she would. Especially when she saw who was sitting beside me in court. And especially when that person opened their mouth and called her by her middle name. She hadn't heard that name in 15 years. And there was a reason for that. She didn't come downstairs the next morning. Not even when I slammed the cabinet a little harder than usual or ran the garbage disposal like I was grinding bone. Normally, that'd drag her down in a huff, bathrobe hanging off one shoulder, snapping at me for starting drama before coffee. But that day, silence. At 7:12 a.m., I left a check for the long guy on the counter, grabbed my thermos, and drove to a storage unit 2 counties over. Unit 312, under an LLC name she'd never heard of, one I registered 2 years ago when she started getting just a little too curious about my tax write-offs. Inside, a folding table, an old laptop, 2 banker boxes, and one very ugly metal filing cabinet with a squeaky drawer that held a secret she forgot existed. Our engagement journal. Yeah, I kept that too. Back when we were in love, she made us do this thing where we'd write entries to each other. For the future, she said. So we can look back and remember how real this is. She stopped writing in it 3 months before our wedding. Her last entry said, "I feel safe when you're around. You make everything quiet in my head." A week later, she bought a burner phone. I only found out because she used my Amazon Prime to order a case for it. She forgot to log out. Slipped up. That's the thing about lies. They age like milk in a hot car. Eventually, they reek. So I sat on the floor of that storage unit, rereading entries from a woman who no longer existed, flipping pages like I was autopsying a corpse. And between those pages, I found what I came for. The original business card of her college roommate, Andrea Wexler. Andrea moved to Chicago right after graduation. She was always the wild card, the one with too much eyeliner and a mouth like a chainsaw. I hadn't thought about her in years. But then, 3 weeks ago, I saw a Venmo payment from my wife to a.wex, captioned with a champagne emoji. My wife doesn't even drink champagne. But Andrea does. Always has. And guess who works as a freelance event planner now? Guess who keeps client logs because she's paranoid about being sued? Guess who remembered an event at the Marriott last year, where a Mrs. Lane requested discreet setup for a private celebration of promotion with a man not named Lane? Andrea spilled it all over a FaceTime call. She didn't want to, not at first. But once I mentioned the word subpoena, she got real talkative. Turns out, she even kept receipts for mileage. She doesn't trust clients. Smart woman. Dumber wife. I left that unit with copies of everything. PDFs, photos, invoices, all tagged and synced to a private server. Redundant backup. Off-site. By the time I got home, she was in the kitchen, robe tied tight, fake cheerful. You working late tonight? Yeah, I said, sipping water. Big week. She smiled. Want me to cook? I swear she almost looked hopeful. Like maybe she'd gaslight herself into thinking I'd just drop it. That I'd bury the affair under the rug like the time she accidentally kissed my coworker at that Christmas party. No need, I said. Already have dinner plans. Her face twitched. Just a hair. She masked it fast, but I saw it. With her, it's always the twitch. The jaw, the cheek, the nostril. That's where the truth leaks out. That night, I didn't go to dinner. I drove to the office, locked the door, and reviewed footage from the nanny cam I hid in the antique clock in our living room. After she told me she'd never bring anyone into our home. Spoiler, she did. And he wore socks. Just socks. But what really got me wasn't the sex. It was what she said afterward, lying on my leather couch, staring up at my ceiling fan. I can't believe he hasn't figured it out yet. He's supposed to be the smart one. The guy chuckled. Let him find out. What's he gonna do? Cry into his spreadsheets? They laughed. Together. At me. And that's when I decided revenge wasn't enough. I wanted audience. So I made a few calls. Legal, strategic. I booked a meeting with someone from her past. Someone who hadn't forgiven her either. Someone she thought she'd buried. When that person shows up in court, she'll know it's not just me watching anymore. It's everyone. And suddenly, do something won't feel so clever. The court date was already set. Civil, not criminal, yet. Custody wasn't on the table because, well, no kids. Just assets. And in our case, the biggest asset was image. You see, my wife, Lane, isn't just some bored suburban spouse. She built a whole brand on being the relatable powerhouse woman. Instagram coach. Marriage advice posts. Smiling pictures of our backyard garden with captions like grow together or grow apart. Thousands of followers. Clients who saw us as the stable couple. Marriage counseling sessions where she charged actual money to teach communication tools. The irony? She gave a TEDx talk about vulnerability 3 weeks after she slept with a married client. I'd uncovered that too. Not through DMs or emails again. No lazy breadcrumbs. Just an offhand remark in a podcast where she mentioned collaborating with Darren M. Same voice she always uses when she lies, too upbeat, just slightly sped up, like her mouth's racing to outrun the guilt. I cross-referenced timestamps, locations, hotel registrations under his LLC. Darren's a real estate guy, lives in Charlotte. Married. Wife's a teacher. And Darren? Darren left a Yelp review for a spa in our city the exact weekend Lane told me she was at a wellness retreat with her college friends. Guess what spa shares a parking lot with the wine bar I tracked the valet receipt to? I wasn't looking for one smoking gun. I was looking for patterns. Lane had tells. Behavioral cycles. Her wellness weekends always followed financial pressure. When her self-employed coaching income dipped, so did her self-restraint. So I charted her lies like weather patterns. Lows, highs, pressure zones. And right in the middle of that storm, a necklace. Gold. Small, delicate. A leaf pendant. She claimed it was a gift from her mother and wore it obsessively, never took it off, not even in the shower. But here's the thing. Her mother died 3 years before she ever started wearing it. I checked, and I found the original Etsy receipt. Guess whose name was on the shipping address? Darren. He bought it, had it gift-wrapped, left a note inside. And Lane? She kept the note. She tucked it inside a worn copy of The Art of War that she used as a background prop in her coaching videos. Fitting, because I've been reading that same book lately. If your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. She wanted a reaction, wanted a scene, slamming doors, screaming matches, evidence she could twist into some narrative of abuse for her followers. But I gave her none of that. Instead, I invited a different kind of storm. I scheduled the court date on a Thursday. Why Thursday? Because Thursday is when she does her weekly live stream. Thousands tune in. She always goes live from her peace corner, this little nook in our house with good lighting and fake plants. But on that Thursday, while she set up her ring light and rehearsed her bullet points about emotional labor, I made sure she got served. On camera. Midstream. Knock at the door. Confused pause. She goes off screen, thinking it's a delivery. Returns ghost pale, eyes darting, voice shaking. Oh, sorry folks, gotta go. Stream ends. I watched the replay with popcorn. Comments flooded in. Is everything okay? You looked scared, queen. Stay strong. Protect your peace. She posted nothing for 3 days. That silence? That was the sound of her realizing she no longer controlled the narrative. The next move came the following Monday, when my attorney requested discovery of all her business invoices, especially the ones she sent to Darren. Not because I care about his money, because I knew she mixed personal payments with coaching expenses. That's tax fraud. You don't get to preach about alignment while misreporting income. And then came the real hammer. I filed a motion to introduce a character witness. Someone she hadn't spoken to since 2011. Someone she betrayed before me. Someone who kept the receipt for what Lane stole from them, both emotionally and legally. They agreed to testify the moment I asked. And when Lane opened the email with the court schedule and saw the name on the witness list, she dropped her phone. I know because I heard it hit the tile. She tried to play it cool that night, made dinner, lit a candle, even put on that damn necklace. But I didn't say a word, because now she was the one with the twitch, the jaw, the cheek, the nostril. And this time, I didn't need to ask, is something wrong? She already knew. The show had started, and she had no idea who'd bought front row seats. I got home on Tuesday to find her sitting on the couch, legs curled under her, cradling a mug she hadn't touched. Cold tea. She was wearing that oversized sweater she only pulled out when she wanted to look soft, non-threatening. Like a sad indie film wife. She didn't speak. Just watched me as I hung up my coat and walked past her to the kitchen. I could feel her eyes boring into the back of my neck. Waiting. Calculating. Finally, her voice too even, too rehearsed. Are we really doing this, Lane? She called me by my last name. Like I was a stranger. Like she hadn't screamed it into a hotel pillow while calling me her rock 6 months before she started sleeping with Darren and pretending I was the problem. I didn't answer. I just opened the fridge, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. She started again, and I watched the tears start to build, carefully measured. Not one had fallen yet. You really blindsided me. I thought we were working through it. That was the bait. I smiled. When exactly did you think that? Before or after the Marriott? Her nostrils flared. Caught. Again. But she couldn't admit it. Not yet. You went nuclear. You're trying to ruin me. I tilted my head. I gave you the chance to confess. You rolled your eyes. You said, do something. So I did. Her hand clenched the mug tighter, knuckles white. You don't know everything. Oh, I hope not, I said. Because what I do know is already enough to tank your coaching license, flag your LLC for an audit, and force 3 clients to testify under oath about why they really hired you for weekend retreats. Her mouth opened. Closed. Then you're twisting everything. You're making this uglier than it has to be. I nodded. Right. Because I'm the one who invited half the state of North Carolina into our marriage. That's when she broke character. The mug slammed onto the table. You were never present, okay? You were married to your spreadsheets and deadlines and your stupid quiet routine. I needed more. There it was. The justification. The grand excuse. I told you what I needed, and you never changed. You're right, I said quietly. I didn't. Because I thought you'd married me for who I was, not who you wanted me to perform as. She stormed out, slammed the bedroom door. I didn't follow. Instead, I went into the garage and opened a small, locked chest above my workbench. Inside was something she'd completely forgotten existed. A journal her therapist had her write in, years ago, during a healing sabbatical after cheating on her last fiancé. How did I get it? She left it at my place when we were still dating. Claimed she burned it. She didn't. I kept it. Never read it. Until now. She wrote everything down. The manipulation. The lies. How easy it was to make him think he was the one unraveling. And the part that made me sit back in my chair and exhale through my teeth? She wrote, if I ever feel trapped again, I'll do what I did to Aaron. No one ever suspects the quiet ones. Aaron. The name on the character witness list. The man she hadn't seen in 14 years. The man who showed up on a Zoom call with my attorney and said, in the most exhausted voice I'd ever heard, she burned my life down. I lost my job, my credibility, even my apartment. And I still thought it was my fault for years. He had the receipts, the therapy logs, the emails, a notarized letter from a counselor. He agreed to testify, not because he wanted revenge, because he wanted closure. But me? I wasn't interested in closure. I wanted precision. I wanted Lane to stand in front of everything she built, her clients, her followers, her brand, and watch it crumble, not from a scream, but from a quiet sentence spoken by a man she tried to erase. And I hadn't even played the wild card yet. Because there was someone else. Not a witness. Not an affair. Someone who was watching everything. Recording. Not a camera. Not audio. A person. Living in the house. And Lane hadn't noticed a thing. She'd find out soon. Very soon. Thursday morning. I left for work like usual. Coffee. Shirt ironed. Same scent I've worn since college. Lane used to say it smelled like home. Now it probably just smells like court dates and consequences. She was already in the kitchen, pouring granola into a glass bowl like this was still a normal marriage. Like we weren't two attorneys away from mutually assured destruction. Need anything before court? She asked, voice light, innocent, almost chipper. I didn't bother responding. Just stared at her for a moment, then walked out. She was clinging to her last weapon, plausible deniability. The good wife performance. The quiet pity play. She had no idea I'd already neutralized that. By the time I hit the parking garage, I got the alert. Motion detected, library room. That was the one spot in the house she thought was safe. Where she took coaching calls and whispered things like, you're not like him, to grown men who paid $600 for her reshape masculinity sessions. I pulled up the live stream. There she was. iPad on her lap. Face lit up with performative empathy. And sitting quietly across from her, out of frame, was our wild card. My nephew, Connor. She thought he was in Arizona, studying mechanical engineering. He was. Until 2 months ago. Now he was living in our house. In the guest suite, basement level. She hadn't noticed. And I didn't need to hide him. Not really. She never went down there. Claimed it was too dusty for her sinuses. Connor had been my shadow for weeks. Sitting in, recording sessions with her clients, with their permission, don't worry, documenting every financial transaction that passed through her coaching LLC. Why him? Because Lane didn't know him. She met him once at our wedding, when he was 15, all acne and braces. Now he was 6'2", shaved head, quiet as death. Tech genius. Said he owed me one for helping him get through college when his dad bailed. He owed me nothing. But he volunteered anyway. And now? He had hours of footage. Evidence of everything. Not just the affairs. The coaching grift. The tax violations. The emotional manipulation. But more importantly, he had the transcripts. Because Lane, in her arrogance, used her real voice in those sessions. And said real things. I had to manipulate him. He never listens unless I threaten to leave. He's not abusive, he's just emotionally useless. I keep him around because he's stable. But God, he's like a spreadsheet in human form. I didn't flinch when I heard that one. You know why? Because stability is the thing they mock until they lose it. Connor chopped the sessions into clips. Labeled. Dated. Annotated. Sent them all to my lawyer in a shared drive called Queen of Contradiction. And inside that drive was one video that wasn't recorded on her iPad. It was a selfie video, drunk. Hotel mirror. She was laughing, with Darren behind her, shirtless. She said into the camera, "This is what self-care looks like, bitches." She posted it to her private story for close friends only. But guess who screen recorded it? Andrea Wexler. Remember her? The champagne emoji roommate. Turns out Lane ghosted her after the Marriott gig. Never paid her for the setup. Andrea waited 6 months. Then called me. I paid her invoice in full. With interest. She's on the witness list too. And she's furious. So now we had a triangle. Andrea, who got stiffed and has physical proof. Aaron, the ex-fiancé with the scorched past. Connor, the silent observer with the cold receipts. And Lane? She was putting on eyeliner, getting ready to smile in front of the judge. She still thought this was going to be a messy but survivable mutual dissolution. She didn't know what courtroom we'd be in yet. She didn't know who else had RSVP'd. And she sure as hell didn't know about the man who would be sitting directly behind me in the gallery. She hadn't seen him in 20 years, but she remembered his voice. And when she heard it again, she'd remember exactly why she changed her name. The courtroom was colder than expected, not in temperature, though the AC was working overtime, but in energy. Quiet, sterile, no tension yet. That part was still walking through security with freshly pressed slacks and a $600 handbag. Lane entered like a woman walking into a panel interview she planned to dominate. Hair straightened, blouse cream-colored, virginal, if you wanted to read into it, and those fake glasses she wore when she wanted to look studious. She didn't see me right away. Her eyes scanned the front row, then the gallery, half a second too long on Andrea, who smiled. Tight-lipped, shark teeth under lipstick. Lane froze for just a heartbeat, kept walking, sat down across from me, lips twitching into something that wanted to be a smirk but couldn't find the nerve. Then her gaze slid left, behind me, and the color drained from her face like someone turned off the power. Her jaw didn't drop. Lane was too trained for that. But her hands? They trembled. She was looking at him. The man I warned her, once, never to lie to again. Federal. Retired. Used to run corporate investigations for Homeland before moving to private sector security. His name's Gil. He also happens to be my godfather. And Lane? She met him once. Briefly. At a fundraiser. Didn't realize who he was until years later, when she applied for a consulting contract through a shell nonprofit and got quietly blackballed from 3 different grants. She thought it was bad luck. It wasn't. Gil never forgot faces. Or liars. And now he was sitting behind me, flipping through a worn leather notepad, occasionally glancing up at Lane like she was already cataloged. She blinked, swallowed, looked back to her lawyer, who leaned in and whispered something that made her nod way too fast. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, but I watched her crack. Not all at once, just little things. She kept adjusting her necklace, tugging her sleeve, sipping water that wasn't there. Judge entered. We stood. Saturday. Proceedings began. Basic stuff at first. Property. Statements of intention. Then the motion to allow character witnesses. Lane's lawyer objected. Weakly. Denied. First up, Andrea. She walked like a runway model in litigation heels. Unfolded her notes. Read, calmly, the service invoice, the Venmo screenshots, the unpaid balance, and the text Lane sent her 6 months ago. Just pretend it didn't happen. I'll tag you in something later. The courtroom murmured. Lane didn't look up. Then came Aaron. Now he didn't walk like a model. He walked like a man still trying to live with the aftermath. Shoulders hunched, words clipped but clear. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just read a paragraph from a letter Lane had written to his therapist after their engagement ended. It said, "Tell Aaron that I never meant to hurt him. I just couldn't imagine being tied down to someone who couldn't play the game." Her lawyer objected to relevance. Judge overruled it. Aaron left the stand without looking at her. Then came Connor. She still didn't know his name. Not until he spelled it out for the record. Connor E. Braddock. Her head jerked. I squinted. You could see the mental Rolodex flipping. He handed the judge a thumb drive. Explained calmly what it contained. Annotated transcripts. Consent forms. Financial records. Videos. Her lawyer turned to her, panicked. Whispered. Lane shook her head. She didn't know. And then, on that screen, played a clip. She was mid-session. Laughing. Holding wine. Saying, "Marriage is a performance, and I'm the damn director. Silence in the room. Her face turned a shade I hadn't seen since our first argument. The one where she threw a vase and then cried because I scared her. But this time, no tears. She was frozen. And then, just when she thought it couldn't get worse, Gil stood up, walked to the edge of the gallery, didn't speak, just handed the judge a sealed envelope. The judge opened it. Read. Eyebrows rose. Then turned to Lane's counsel. You may want to review this before proceeding further. Her lawyer skimmed, blinked, sat back like he'd just been gut-punched. Lane reached for the paper. He wouldn't hand it to her. Instead, he leaned in, whispered something. She looked at me, and for the first time in our entire marriage, she looked afraid. Not angry, not manipulative. Afraid. Because she remembered now exactly what she did to Gil's niece. And she remembered what she said at that bar all those years ago, when she thought no one was listening. Some people are just stepping stones. Burn them if they get too wet. She burned the wrong one. And now the water's rising. She didn't come home that night. I waited. Not because I missed her, but because I wanted to see what version of herself she'd choose to return as. The martyr? The seductress? The woman wronged by a vindictive little man. She had a whole costume closet full of personas. I'd seen them all, but the front door stayed quiet. Midnight came and went. Still nothing. I went to bed, slept like a rock. When I woke up the next morning, her car was in the driveway. But she wasn't in the bedroom or the kitchen. She was in the garage, sitting on a lawn chair, wrapped in a throw blanket, barefoot, staring at nothing, like a puppet whose strings had been cut mid-sentence. The garage door was still down. No fumes, no melodrama, just stillness. Long night. I asked. She flinched, turned slowly. You have no idea what you've done. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Enlighten me. Her voice dropped. I had contracts, clients, plans. I had a speaking engagement next month. And now, I have emails, Lane. Angry ones. Cancellations. Refund requests. People saying I presented myself dishonestly. Did you? I asked. That stopped her. Only for a second. Then came the tears. This time not fake. Not for effect. Just quiet, pathetic, dripping down her cheekbones. I built everything from scratch, she whispered. Everything. And you buried people to do it, I said. You don't remember Gil's niece, do you? Her head jerked. That had nothing to do with. She trusted you. I cut in. She was fresh out of college, working at that nonprofit, and you got her fired over a grant. Because you submitted late and needed a scapegoat. She looked down. It was just politics. No, it was you. And Gil remembered. She didn't speak, just rocked in the chair a little, like maybe if she moved enough, time would start going backward. I crouched down so we were eye level. You think I'm the one who burned your life down. But I didn't. I just built mirrors. You walked straight into your own reflection. That afternoon, my lawyer filed an addendum. We were no longer pursuing standard asset division. We were requesting damages, breach of contract, malicious defamation, business interference. Lane had built her brand with our marriage as the centerpiece. Now the collapse of that brand was part of the public record. And then came the press. Not tabloids, better. Industry blogs, coaching networks, wellness watchdogs. Because when Connor uploaded that coaching footage, it wasn't to YouTube. It was to an anonymous tip submission for SpeakCredibly.com, a platform that audits life coaches for ethical violations. Lane's clips got flagged by 5 separate moderators within an hour. She was trending by nightfall. Reddit threads, TikToks. Coach canceled after husband exposes coaching cult. And the best part? She still had one event left she was legally contracted to attend. A panel at the local university's Women in Leadership Conference. She couldn't back out without breaching the contract. And that panel was 2 days away. Guess who's moderating the Q&A? Connor. Full circle. She didn't sleep the night before it. I heard her pacing. Down the hall. In the kitchen. Then silence. When she walked out the next morning, she looked like a ghost in heels. Hair tied back. No jewelry. Just that dead stare of a woman who knows the script has turned on her. And I said nothing. Because nothing needed to be said anymore. She was already standing on the trapdoor. The only thing left was to pull the lever. The panel was scheduled for 11 a.m. sharp. Venue, a modest lecture hall at Hawthorne University, just big enough for 100 seats, just small enough to feel intimate, which is exactly what they wanted when they booked Lane 6 months ago. Back then, her image was untouchable. Marriage architect, emotional strategist, the woman who redesigned her husband into the man of her dreams. Yeah, that line aged like dairy. She arrived 5 minutes before go time, flanked by her assistant and wearing sunglasses indoors like she was bracing for paparazzi. There were none. Only students with clipboards, a few faculty in cardigans, and Connor, already seated on stage, mic clipped, laptop open. She didn't recognize him. Not immediately. His posture was different. Confident. Clean-cut. Like a man with nothing to lose and receipts to spare. I watched from the second row. Blended into the back half of the audience, just another middle-aged guy in a navy blazer. The event began with the moderator, a communications professor, giving Lane the warmest, driest intro I'd ever heard. This next speaker has a background in coaching, branding, and conflict navigation. She joins us today to discuss ethical entrepreneurship in modern relationships. Lane took the mic, voice steady, smile brittle. She started strong, slid right into her usual script, the origin story, the aha moment, when she realized her marriage could be optimized, the workshops, the followers, the life-changing testimonials. What she didn't know was that half the people in the room weren't students. They were invited guests. 3 of her ex-clients. 2 editors from Speak Credibly. 1 woman who'd filed a complaint after paying $3,000 for Lane's Reclaim Your Power course and was ghosted midway. And me. She took questions at the 30-minute mark. Connor stood up, holding the mic. Hi. Connor Braddock. Student researcher. My question's about authenticity. Would you say it's possible to use vulnerability as a branding tool while concealing contradictory personal behaviors? A flicker. Just one. Her mask cracked. I'm not sure I understand, she replied smoothly. Connor nodded. Okay, maybe this will help. Could you comment on the ethical implications of charging clients for trust-based services while actively violating the values you teach, specifically fidelity, transparency, and emotional accountability? Silence. Then murmurs. Then a woman near the back raised her phone. She was live streaming. Another stood and said, Are you the same Lane from the Reddit thread going viral right now? Another, Did you really say your marriage was a performance? Then it broke. A student walked to the aisle, held up her phone. On the screen, a paused video. Lane, glass of wine in hand, laughing at a hotel bar. I call it emotional leverage. The recording played. The trick is making him feel like it was his idea to apologize. Lane's face dropped. And Connor? He just leaned into his mic. For context, this footage was gathered with full consent from the involved parties and submitted to a third-party ethics board. It's currently under formal review by the National Coaching Association. Lane tried to speak. The mic picked up a shaky inhale. But she froze, like a deer watching its own obituary scroll across a teleprompter. She turned, left the stage. No applause. No closing statement. Just the sharp click of her heels fading into the hall. I stood slowly, walked out the back door. Outside, the sunlight was brutal. She was standing near the curb, phone in hand, breath hitching, trying to order a ride that wouldn't come. She turned as I approached. Her eyes were glassy, her voice low. Why? Why are you doing this to me? I looked at her. Really looked. For once, no anger, no sarcasm, just cold fact. I'm not doing this to you. You did this to yourself. I just pulled the curtain. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, please. But I walked away, because I wasn't finished. This wasn't the climax. Not yet. She thought it was over because her image was gone. But Lane forgot something far more important than followers. She forgot what she signed. And in 24 hours, a judge was about to remind her. The courthouse was humming when I arrived. Not loud, just that low ambient tension, like the hum of an electric fence. People shuffling papers, murmuring into phones, pretending everything was routine. It wasn't. Not for Lane. She showed up late. 5 minutes past the hour. Disheveled in that expensive, polished kind of way. Hair pulled into a bun too tight, skin powdered just a little too heavy. I recognized the blazer. She wore it during our anniversary dinner last year. Right before she told me she wasn't sure she believed in monogamy anymore, then pivoted to a lecture on emotional fluidity. She didn't look at me as she walked in. She looked at the table, at the stack of folders, at the one object sitting in front of my attorney, a single white envelope with her signature on it. The judge entered. Proceedings resumed. Lane's lawyer opened with a request to settle. Privately. Quietly. He even used the word amicable. My attorney smiled. That tight, professional kind of smile lawyers use right before they pull a lever and send someone through a trapdoor. Your Honor, he said calmly, we're happy to settle. But per the original agreement between the parties, certain clauses are now triggered. He passed the envelope to the bailiff. The judge opened it, scanned the page, then raised one brow and turned to Lane. Mrs. Lane Callahan, née Spencer, can you confirm your signature on this document? Lane leaned forward, squinted. Silence. Yes, she whispered. Excellent, the judge said, tapping the paper. This is a premarital agreement dated February 13th, 9 years ago. It stipulates that, in the event of proven infidelity, the offending party waives all rights to shared business holdings, property equity, and residual profit from intellectual property developed during the marriage. Her lawyer blurted that agreement was superseded. By the 2018 revision, my attorney cut in, which included an addendum specifically reinstating the infidelity clause, signed and notarized after marital counseling. Lane's lips parted. She looked like someone slowly realizing the road she thought was paved ends at a cliff, because she'd signed that revised prenup on a weekend trip to reset after her first affair. Back then, she thought she'd outgrown cheating. Thought it was a fluke. A phase. We both knew better now. The judge continued. Based on the video evidence, financial inconsistencies, and corroborating witness statements, the court finds sufficient grounds to activate the infidelity clause. Lane's lawyer was still speaking, objecting, trying to stall. But it was over. She had waived her claims. To the house. The brand. The income. The book she self-published under our LLC. She billed it all on our marriage. And now it legally belonged to me. All of it. But we weren't done. Because then the judge turned the page. There's a second motion on file regarding punitive damages. My lawyer stood. Your Honor, given the coordinated defamation campaign, financial manipulation, and misuse of professional services, we're requesting $275,000 in damages. Reimbursable over a 10-year period or satisfied through asset forfeiture. Lane went pale. Her lawyer leaned into her ear. She didn't move, didn't blink. Just stared at the table like it was swallowing her whole. The judge sighed, looked at her. Mrs. Callahan, you have the option to contest this in a formal trial. But be advised, discovery would open your entire client history, private messages, recordings, and financials to the court. Finally, she moved. A slow, jerky nod. Her voice cracked. I accept the terms. It was done. 9 years wrapped in 36 minutes. I stood, collected my jacket. Walked past her without stopping. But she grabbed my sleeve. I turned. She looked up. Her voice hollow. You ruined me. I leaned in, voice calm. No. You just finally saw what you look like without the mask. She didn't reply. Just sat there. Still. Like she had in the garage. Like she did when the mirror finally refused to lie. But we weren't quite at the end yet. There was one last thread I hadn't pulled. Not legal. Not financial. Something personal. Because while Lane had been torching everything, she'd overlooked one small, fragile lie. A lie I'd been sitting on for 6 months. The one she told my mother. And that? That was about to burn hotter than everything else combined. The phone call came at 7:13 p.m. She always called around then, my mother. Like clockwork. Ever since my dad passed, she checked in nightly. Not out of worry, just habit. But this time, she didn't ask how my day was. She just said, I saw the video. Lane's face. Lane's voice. Lane laughing about weaponizing empathy in her own words, now living on 10,000 TikTok stitches and a trending Reddit thread called #CoachOrCon. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, engine off, phone against my ear. Mom continued. I also saw her speaking at that church retreat last year, talking about honoring your husband through accountability. Remember? I did. Lane had stood next to her that day, hand on her shoulder, smiling like they were blood. She told me you couldn't have children, Mom said. She said you were the reason. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. She said that. There was a long pause. Then, she said she had tried. That she miscarried twice. That she couldn't talk to you about it because you'd shut down emotionally. I stared through the windshield. The sky above the courthouse turning lavender and gold. She lied, I said. Quietly, Mom exhaled hard. I know now. What she didn't know, what Lane never imagined I knew, was the real story behind those miscarriages. There were no miscarriages. Just a single pregnancy. 8 years ago. I found the clinic receipt 2 years after the fact, folded into a dog-eared copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves that Lane used to prop up her laptop during Zoom calls. She never told me. The name she used was her maiden name. The address was her sister's apartment. But the due date? That matched the same month she told me she was hormonal from stress and needed space. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I pulled the medical records. The signature on the procedure form? Hers. The emergency contact? Not me. It was Darren. Same man from the Marriott. Same man who, at the time, was listed in her phone as Dr. Morris with a stethoscope emoji. I'd let that information sit. Quietly. Stewing in the dark. Why? Because sometimes revenge doesn't come in volume. It comes in timing. And the moment was now. I forwarded the records to her church board, to the women's retreat organizers, to the 2 parenting podcasts where she'd appeared as a childless warrior of faith. I didn't say a word in the messages. Just attached the PDFs and let the dates speak for themselves. By midnight, her website was down. Her Instagram was wiped clean. And her last remaining sponsor, BetterFamiliesTogether.org, posted a single-line update on their homepage. We have severed all affiliations with Lane Callahan, effective immediately. The next morning, I found her sitting on the front steps of the house she no longer owned, wearing the same cream-colored blouse from court, makeup smudged, hands in her lap like she was waiting for a verdict that had already been read. I lied to everyone, she murmured as I passed. I stopped, just for a second. No, I said. You lied to yourself. The rest of us were just collateral. She looked up at me. For the first time in years, her face didn't look manipulative, or smug, or calculating. It looked empty, and I felt nothing. Not hate, not satisfaction, just stillness. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's letting them stand in the wreckage they swore would never come, and walk away knowing. They lit the match.